Okay, good evening. Okay, here we are. We're back to the Akeidat. I want to finish to see these things inside because the cloud is, you never believe anything until you see the primary source. So let's look at again, as we discussed on Friday night, two aspects. One, the idea of it not being a tzivui. We discussed at length with them. And at the end, we also discussed the ambiguousness of the nevuah. And that's the point that the Rambam brings up. And I'd like to read it inside to see exactly what that is. In order to understand this better, I would first like to quote a Rambam. Rambam Beis Abchir. Let's see it again. It's the source Dalet if you have it in front of you. You don't have a sheet? Go ahead, take it. I should have something here. You know what? Take this. I need something to tell people where to look. So in source Dalet, you should have Rambam Beis Abchir. Just as an Agdama, there's a very famous machlokes, which is a bit misconstrued as what the focal point of the Beis Abchira is. We know that the Ramban writes that the focal point of the Beis Abchira is basically the Aron HaKodesh, because it's there with Kiba Onan Eroer Al HaKapayris, that all nevuahs come through the Onan, which is Beina Kruvim. All nevuahs, they go first Beina Kruvim. That's like the way station where the information comes from God, and so to speak, vis-a-vis Beina Kruvim, and from there it goes to the Navi. I really don't know exactly how these things work, but that's what it says, okay? All nevuahs come from Beina Kruvim. For example, if Yecheskel, which was in Chutz La'aretz, had to get a nevuah, it came down in Yerushalayim Beina Kruvim. From there, it shot over to Nahar Kvor, where Yecheskel was, and that's where he got his nevuah. It always came through Yerushalayim, through Beina Kruvim. The idea of the Migdash is the Makom Ha'oren, specifically because that's the Makom Hashras Hashchina. That's the idea of the Kruvim and Nevuah. The idea behind it was a constant place of God's dialogue with man, as a continuance of the dialogue that started with man at Sinai. Okay, the Nevuahs Moshe with Har Sinai, which is Eish, which Gdoila, and the Anan. The parallel to that is the Eish, is because the Kruvim were Zahav, and Zahav with old gold is red. If you ever look at your grandfather's old gold watches, okay, they're what we call red ore. And the more it's distilled and filtered, they take away the different the metals, and then it becomes like lighter. They have white gold they have today. Okay, but reality is that real gold, when it comes out of the earth, is quite red. And that's connected the Eish HaGdoila, the Eish that the Ramban really writes this, okay? And the Anan, etc., that is there to have I would say, a mobile Sinai unit. The constant, the Sinai goes with man wherever he is, and the Nevuah, which starts in Sinai, continues through the generations. That's a pshat, the koil godel v'lo yosaf, that the koil never stops, as the Ramban explains in his Hagdama to the Torah, that all the nevuahs, the shorish lies in the nevuahs Moshe of Chamisha Chumshei Torah, and it's all nirmaz there. And Yecheskel, we wanted to understand, prophesize basically, and to understand the nevuah of the Mesa Merkava, he had to look in the Chumash, and from there he found it. And when Avihu, one of the friends of Eov, wanted to say the Seder of Yason, he looked in the Chumash and he saw it there. So obviously it means to say the total dialogue of God and man is in history is found in the Chumash, but obviously the interpreter will only be the person which was meant to interpret in history. Because Yeshayahu did not see the Merkava the way Yecheskel. Yeshayahu has a small four-liner and he has a whole perik. Okay, obviously it says more than that. It says the Shlomo HaMelech, where did he learn Sichos Kol and Va'ifos? He learned it also from the Chumash. No, I hate to say it. I don't know if Moshe Rabbeinu knew it. So he wrote the Chumash, but he didn't have the Kalim to see in there that. So one has to understand it's an ongoing voice of Sinai, which different Kalim through the generations, and they have Kalim to interpret it in whatever way Kodesh Baruch Hu wants it through Nevuah. This is what the Ramban says is the Ikar of the Migdash. The Ikar of the Migdash is the dialogue between God and man. The Karbanis, by the way, is important, etc., but that's not the Ikar of the Migdash. We know that the Migdash is called Mishkan HaEdus, the residence of the covenantal tablets. We know that to be a pasuk in Chumash. So he understands it's lav dafka the tablets, but be'ikr, it's the idea of Torah in the tablets is the equivalent of the luchos, and the anan above it is like the anan of Sinai, and the ikr is the nevuah. The nevuah, as I said before, which the mice is shorsh notes in the Torah. That Torah that Moshe got in Sinai is the shorish of all the nevuahs, all the dialogue between God and man for generations. This is the Ramban's approach. The Rambam's approach is not that way. If people look at the Rambam carefully, Lashon the Rambam is mitzvahs, the first perik aleph alochav, mitzvahs asay, livnos bayis LaHashem. It's not, you don't have it here, so I'll say it about peh. Muchan lahakiv boya korbanos. V'chaygigim elav shalish pavim b'shana. The mitzvah is A, to build a bayis LaHashem, B, it should be prepared, should be capable of having korbanos. And we celebrate around it thrice yearly. That's the Lashon HaRambam. So what is the exact purpose, and what is the identity, what's the ikar point of the Mishkan, of Migdash? Well, we look carefully. A, Bayis LaHashem. B, Karbanis. C, Chagim Elav Shalish Pam B'Shana. It's interesting why somehow the Olam, which I don't have a clear definition with that words in Yeshivish, the Olam, somehow takes for granted. The Rambam thinks that the focal point of the Mishka Migdash is not the Aron, but rather the Mizbeach. Why? Because it says Bayis LaHashem Mukum Lachaber Karbanis. It doesn't mention the Nevuah there, which is fair as far as that's it's correct. The problem is people who do that do not never learn Mar Nevuchim, and don't realize that without an Oren, as I pointed out multitudes of times, at the end of the 13th Perek of Zvachim, that without an Oren, it's not called a Migdash, it's called a Bama G'dayla. Which a major nafkaminis la'alacha. It only is a Migdash specifically if there's an Oren. And that's why the Rambam Paskins in Hilchos Beis Abchira, that B'bayis Sheni there was an Oren. It was not where it's supposed to be, a regular place. When Shlomo HaMelech built the Beis HaMikdash, he built subterranean caverns, reminds of a Spielberg movie, and the lost Ark is actually found in the subterranean caverns of the Harabayis. And because of that, the Beis HaMikdash Hasheni is called a Migdash and not a Bama. That's why the Rambam Paskin says a machlokes in Gemara with Oren Hugla Lebavel or Oren Nignas b'Mekaymai, and the Rambam Paskin that was Nignas b'Mekaymai b'Mei Yashiyot. So the obvious question is, like every Achron asks, why would the Rambam have be machri and a machlokes in history? Mana said every person is chelik in Torah. So my chelik in Torah is to remember Tosefta. It's very pashik because the Rambam Paskin is that Tosefta that without a Oren, it's not a Migdash, it's a Bama. And if you want to be a Bama, al kochach you hold that you want to be a Migdash, al kochach you hold that or nignas b'mekaymai. Yeah, that's the chagav, a very important thing to know. It's interesting because some Sefer has what to say, the Yankev has what to say, and this is the pashtus. This is simple, okay? Memela. So we know that it's very clear that in order to be a Migdash, first and foremost, you need an Aron. The Rambam writes in Mar Nevuchim when he describes the Migdash, he said just like all other nations built temples or big edifices for their Avodah Zarah, and they would put there the idol or the standard which they would meditate on of what it really meant. For example, they worshipped a certain astrological sign, which meant, as we learned in Rambam, it means to say they understood that God has Mishorsim. We did this once. And the Mishorsim are the Kechavim, the Mazalos. And basically, because we don't want a direct relationship with God because he's overwhelming, let's have a relationship with this nobleman. The noblemen are the Kechavim and Mazalos. We learned this. And why do we think they're noblemen? Because he put them higher than us. At least that's how they thought. And they understood the same message from God that they're more important than you. You're like a serf. Honoring your local baron, you don't have access to the king. You don't even want access to the king because to live in Versailles was terrible. I mean, you ran around and you celebrated him putting on his shoes. You know what I mean? It was not the best. Living in nobility of France in Versailles was horrendous. If there weren't even enough toilets anyway. But whatever, it was a horrendous life. I mean, the people were a geisig dealer. The guy got dressed. You need to have 100 people there, and if you weren't there, you're a Murray B'Malchus. I have to see exactly how they put on his left shoe. Rachmanis on them. You think there was a Yagin Vanach who wants to live that way? I'd rather be in my shtetl, and the local baron doesn't care if I come to see how he gets dressed. I pay him some taxes, and I party on my own, which is the same thing here. I'm going to sit with God. You have to see how he gets dressed, so to speak. Everything is important. If you don't show up, you are married by Malchus. God, do me a favor. You can stay in the Versailles. I'll deal with the local Baron of Orleans. He drinks beer. He's a nice guy. He's in the pub. We're very good, and him I can work with. Okay, but they worship the Baron. They worship the Kechavim. So they understood that Kechavim are Shamashim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But how are they going to paint? What are they going to do? You can't exactly talk to the star. So what do? You have an icon. You know anything about religious art? Look it up in your Wikipedia, because you don't own the Britannica. Okay? So look up an iconic art. Icon, I-C-O-N. You probably think an icon is Andy Warhol. Excuse me, I don't know. Some baseball player is an icon. Elvis is an icon. But icon actually means a window in the sky. It means to say they had religious pictures which were blessed with the sacrament. And through that, when you would meditate on the picture, you would have an entry into the true person behind the picture. For example, if you had a picture of St. Paul, some guy, Paul, Peter, Paul, and Mary, Paul. So anyway, Paul. So it was an exact picture. It's about an exact picture, like these pictures of Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam. You ever see these pictures of Rabbeinu Tam and Rashi? It's really cool. The best thing is you go to Miron, they have pictures of Rashbi. And I mean, how idiotic can people be? I don't understand. But you go all over Israel, and there's pictures of Rashbi. Rashbi sat down for a portrait. I'm surprised they don't have a picture of Adam Arishan yet. I don't know what the difference is between Rashbi and Adam Arishan. But whatever it be, you see this. You go by your Meir Bonus, they got pictures of Rav Meir. No pictures of Bruria. But there's definitely pictures. I don't know why. You take a nice picture of a good-looking girl, and she has to be a bit wise, like a Nishma type, and you know what, and make her into Bruria. What's the big deal? She's Yoetzet Halacha and Gendik. No, we don't. I don't know why, but that's the way it is. But at the end of the day, I've had a long day, guys. So I'm chilling here. If you don't mind, I really have Wednesday is a very long day for me. Okay, so at the end of the day, what do? You have this picture, which you know is not a real picture. For example, the primitive pictures of stars or the sun. It's a yellow ball with sticks coming out of it, right? That's what you did in kindergarten, right? Now, if you look at the ancient idols, that's what they were. Now, goodness, no one thought that that's what the sun was. It's how it was reflected in a very primitive way, because what were those sticks? It's the aura of light. It didn't have sticks in it. It's not like a ball. It's like a coronavirus. It's got sticks all over it and a ball. No, this was a primitive depiction of an aura, right? It's very simple. It's like one was in Rome once, and I noticed that they, in St. Peter's Basilica, in St. Peter's Square, St. Peter's Square, that's the enormous square right in front of the Vatican. That's when the Pope comes out to say his drushes, his sichot, and his mamarim. So that's not funny. He does. He has all epistles. Some of them are interesting. The last one, into Santa Mensch. He printed a book. It's an interesting book, actually. Okay, not sure if you're allowed to read it, but it's a good book. Anyway. And he's an intelligent human being. He's like, but what can you do? He's going to fry in hell. But it doesn't matter, but he's intelligent. He's going to fry intelligently. Anyway, so Benedict, I think his name was Benedict or something like that. He quit. He retired. There was a yeshiva that retired. Makes sense. So he retired, and he Baruch, right? Yeah. Baruch retired. Okay. So he has a very good book, by the way. Anyway, so going back here, so they have these primitive art. Now they realize that's not the sun. So when you go to I'll tell you 10 Pete's. So 10 Pete's, so they have all the Gedolim. They have statues of them all around. It's very interesting to see. The whole Moshe Gedolim Torah from the very beginning. I'm not joking. All the Gedolim, like you used to have Gedolim cards. I got 2 shachs for 1 sway or something like that. You have these things. It comes together with bubble gum. I didn't have those things. I had baseball cards. We didn't have Gedolim in those days. But my grandchildren have the shach is pushed. They say that's simple. He wants a psa. Ich weiß the Schwas, give me whatever local rabbi, Steinman with the big beard before it fell. That was a collector's item, okay, or something like that. So, these different things. So they also have the same thing. They have, it's unbelievable to see. It's an enormous area, and they have statues of all the Rebbes. What's a saint? The saint is a Kudish, Harahak. That's what a saint is, right? And he's officially recognized as a Rav Kodesh. At least he got smicha. By us, every rebbe is called a Rav Kodesh. At least there, they have to get smicha for it, which is nice. There's the bechina and the smicha. I think it's more trustworthy than what we have by us. At least there's some kind, you get a smicha for it. So that's what what they have is they have plates in the back of their head. And I'm looking, all these guys have a round circle in the back of their head. Now, why would they have plates in the back of the head? I remember when I saw this was in 1967. I was in Rome, and I said, "Why would they have plates in the back of their heads?" Then I hopped after 2 seconds. You see, they believe in a saint has an aura. Okay, what's an aura? It's actually light like a circle above your head, right? There used to be a TV program called The Saint. Okay, so you used to have you have an aura above your head, aura makif it's called. So they believe in aura makif, that aura which is makif, a circle of light around your head. This is the aura, okay? I guess you don't know. Go to the museum, for goodness sakes. And you'll see, so you can't exactly paint it this way, because how's it gonna hang? But they could have put a stick up here and then put like a plate on top of it. But there would be a plate, but the chayre, it's only a circle. So they made a plate. What can you do? Because they had no other brera. And they couldn't exactly put a stick there because it probably didn't fall. So they put it in the back of his head. Now you look at iconic art, that's what it looks like. They have the saint, and they have like a white circle of light in his back. It's really not supposed to be his back. It's supposed to be around his head. That's primitive depiction, but they understood what they meant. And so you look at iconic art, you realize, believe me, this is St. Paul as much as that's Rashi and Rashbi. But it doesn't matter, because it was primitive depiction. It's like these pictures of the Gra. I have like 4 different versions. Which one it is, you'd be surprised. Okay, I actually have the original first piece of depiction of the Gra in a very primitive art, and it was painted like 90 years after the Gra passed away. Which means to say, it's in a picture. It looks like the Gra, like it looks like, I don't know, like John Wayne. You wouldn't know the difference. It's 90 years later, for goodness sakes. So how is he supposed to know what he looked like? It's be'erich. And then you'd see how other pictures based on that became very artsy. You wouldn't even believe it, how people made pictures of the Gra based on that original thing. I actually have it at home, okay? Yeah, the picture of the Gra, my foot. But what's the idea of a sacred picture? The answer, it doesn't matter. You're taking a piece of art, which is mugdosh. There's certain like kedushas habayis, kedushas azoros. They have lachmatoida, whatever they do to make that kaddish. And that means to say, when you look into it and you meditate on who this depicts, this astrological sign. This Rebbe Pinchas, I don't know, Peter Pinchas, or John is Yochanan the Baptist. Pinchas, Yochanan, other good names that they had over there. They had a pope, it was Yosha Pinchas, what was his name? John Paul. So Yosha Pinchas, was Pinchas, the first person, the second, the third, and you meditate on the person, on the image, which is expressed in some, because that's the sacramental picture. It's like a window in the sky. And you mamish can connect. It's very conducive to connecting. Very similar to an idea that we have called bracha. The Ikrim writes, what's a bracha? A bracha means to say you're not right to get a shefa from a Kadosh Baruch Hu, but there are people which are worthy. So they become like your lightning rod, and then they are the makkah of the bracha. They with proximity next to you, they can like transmit the bracha to you. That's why the bracha has nothing to do with the das of the mavorech. He's nothing more than a lightning rod. That's why Yaakov can bless Esav, and it works for Yaakov. Yitzchak can bless Esav, and it goes to Yaakov. But I mean, he had a kavanah for Esav. How does it work? The Torah says he's not the mavorech. He's the lightning rod of the bracha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the Sefer Ikrim, Yosef Elbow, which writes, it's a very important Nakuda. The same idea. The idea, you have a certain connect. He's your imtzoi. He is the lightning rod, which through that you get the Shef of Elokus. So an icon is the same idea. So the Rambam writes that that's what Ovdei Avodah Zarah did. They created temples and they put these images, which they realized that these images don't do a thing. They didn't think that these dolls created anything. Sometimes what you picked up in kindergarten and you actually think that's what happened. You don't have the cherets for the people who really did this, okay? If you read Rambam, you don't understand. No, these dolls were nothing more than, again, like iconic art. I have a friend, a Jew, which is a Buddhist, and he gives rice and flowers to dolls. But I once went to visit him. Hey, I said, you really worship this? He says, are you kidding? And he threw it at me. He says, but it's your God. Gee, you an idiot. But this is my God. It's a depiction of an idea. I just want you to understand, any intelligent Avodah are not the populace. The populace also think that if you wear fur tails and breeches, you're holy. That's a garnish, just like most Jews don't know anything about Judaism. Most Goyim don't know about Goyishkeit. But if you're a Lumdische Jew, which became a Shegetz, at least you'll understand it. Okay, so this guy's one of my friends. So he's we have a friend. He's going to burn in hell. I always tell him, but he's going to burn. He's going to burn. No question. I think we'll let him in. You know what I mean? But at least a chatwas atut. You understand? He's Ovdei Avodah Zarah in a very interesting way. Okay, but it's Ovdei Avodah Zarah. He didn't use Chayiv Misa. But he doesn't believe in the Tao. He doesn't say, Jesus, please listen to me. Jesus, what do you mean? Who said Jesus looked like that? I think he was a redhead. And whoever said he had a beard, probably had a goatee. I don't know. They have these beautiful pictures. Now they decide that this is Jesus, right? That's the way it works. How do they know? Someone took a portrait. You know, it works. It's like the Gross picture, and Rabbi Natam's picture, and the Rajvi's picture. So Jesus' picture. Outside the Zelbazach. That's Baba Mises. But once again, it doesn't matter because it's not, religion here does not need history. It needs a window in the sky to connect to an idea or whatever it only be. That's the idea. So they say basically that's what Ovdei Avodah Zarah did. They made a heichal and put it in the tselem of their idea. What was it there for? To meditate on the idea through the tselem. The tselem was like an iconic eye. It was a window in the sky through which you can connect to that idea or that power or that whatever it only be, which you really have no clue what it is, but you know you connect to it through its image. So that is not a God. That's called Avodah Zarah, okay? It's just a nicer, it makes more sense, but it's Pashut. That's Prosta Avodah Zarah, okay? So, you know, like some people think you want to connect to the Rebbe, you put a picture of the Rebbe under your pillow. Right to the Zelbazach. I don't want to say anything. Right to the Zelbazach. V'chulu, 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 v'chulu. Okay, I know when I was a kid, they used to put animals around little kids. Now they put Rebbe Gdolim pictures in the poor cribs. You know what I mean? They're going to be warped, those poor things. You know what I mean? They're going to think that the world is a bunch of old men with beards. You know, and I really am rachmanis on the generation. I hope you guys don't do it to your kids. I think it's abuse. Anyway, at the end of the day, I know the Bavcher Rebbe said, please put only kosher animals. That's something else. He doesn't want the kids should see Maris Tameos. It should see Maris Tahiris. That makes sense. It's a reikech. When you take a kid to cheder, why do they cover the face with the towels the first day? Because when you're going to learn Torah, you should not have anything which is tummy in front of your eyes. It's a very nice idea. It's a reikech. Reikech is early, from the early German Mekubalim. So I can understand the idea of, you know, of having like, don't put a dinosaur in there. It's not kosher. You know, put a giraffe. That's kosher. You know what I mean? Put it, the kid shouldn't see it. You don't have to have porky, you know, or you don't have to hog there. It's okay. Put a cute little Marietta little lamb. That's all. But today they put in rabbis with beards. That's something else. This is a new world. So I'm trying to say, but they're all icons. They form your mind to think about ideas. That's what they do to you. So the Rambam says that God told us to do the same thing. Take the Luchas HaBris, which is the embodiment of the covenantal relationship with God. But let's be honest, is that the bris? You can break it. The bris is there anyway. It's an icon. I don't want to sound terrible. It's a super icon. It's a holy icon. That's what it is. And that icon, you meditate in proximity of that icon, through that icon, to your covenantal relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and that's where you're connecting to God. Then, once you've done that, go to the Mizbech and Mimakim your Kabbalah. So now the Rambam himself is the first and foremost, the Ikar of the Mikdash is the Arai. That's where it starts. The Rambam actually writes the only, if the human nature wouldn't have been the way it is, God would have made it a religion with no externalities, only with profound meditation, thought, and feeling. The idea that that the human being needs activities, restrictions, etc., is only because of the deficiency of the human character, which God modeled. And that type of a character needs a lot of do's and don't do's, etc. But there will come a time post-Messianic era, which is probably according to Rambam only, I don't know when and how it's going to be in the oil of the shamas without gufim. Then we won't have all that. Then we're going to have pure just connection through mind, with a Kadosh Baruch Hu. While we're in a guf, we're deficient. So we have all these different laws to govern how to express our relationship. But in a perfect reality where the Shema will be without guf, you don't have to express your relationship. You experience your relationship. You don't need words, the thought alone. What are you doing, Gan Eden? Tzadikim Yoshvim. It sounds like you were in kindergarten. You sit around in a circle, you have a crown on your head, and you smile at the kindergarten teacher. Is that what it looks like? It's a pretty boring way to do things, and that's perpetual. No, what does it really mean? You sit around, and the glory of your chachma, means to say the Karen Or of your chachma is above you. You're connecting to light, which is higher than you are. You're being illuminated. You have experienced, you're from the Illuminati. You've experienced, I don't mean in historical sense, okay? Your name isn't Newton. But I mean to say you are an illuminated, you've attained what we call in Buddhism. You've attained pure peace, okay? Serenity. You're enlightened. You're the enlightened one, that's what it means. And you have the pure pleasure of understanding the profundity of, as much as possible, of God and his interaction with the creation. That's what it means. You're going to be sitting all day basking in that glory. Now, I always tell people, what are you going to, that's all you do all day. I think hell is going to have a football game. Okay? Or you sit there and bask in the glory of the Lord. Okay, come on, guys. Like, if you're not used to learning Tosfos now, you'll die there. What are you going to do there? You don't enjoy Chokhmah. If you'll enjoy Chokhmah, so now that's the super pleasure of Chokhmah. What you enjoy is a good steak. That's in hell, not in heaven. In hell, you'll have steak with kugel and with chonks for Thursday night, like a nice yeshiva place, etc. And they'll have hookahs. They'll have all these different things. That's what hell is. Okay, that's what hell is. That means you're living at Tzimtzum HaMoichin, and you have this terrible busha of being in the Neshama, living in the Tzimtzum of Moichin of Gashmias. That's the fires of hell. The Beis HaLevi says, what's the fires of hell? The busha of experiencing what a low life you lived all your life. And they're not going to let you do more than that. You continue living, your low life, you continue being a low life. And anyway, now you'll feel the enormous busha of that low life. That's the Eish of Gehenim. It's the Beis HaLevi. In Parshas Vayigash on the Gemara of Oilanim Ani Yosef Oid Avichai, and the Chazal say Oilanim Yom Hadin Oilanim Yom HaTeichacha. That just like they had the busha of the Teichacha, Yom Hadin, what happens? We're going to have the tremendous busha of the Teichacha of how we lived our lives, and that's the Eish again. Look up the Beis HaLevi there with Tim Tzanachas. Okay, so you understand. So Gan Eden means to say you're going to sit and bask in the glory of and the pleasure of understanding. That's all it is. That's all. That's a lot for people who live in a world of Chachma. People who don't experience that world, I don't know if they want it. They're going to be bored. You might as well condition yourself beforehand. Otherwise, what are you doing there? You'd rather go to hell. At least they have state dinners. Okay, you'll be ashamed of eating it. It'd be like Basar Taiva. You'll have a steak dinner, you feel a low life for eating. But at the end of the day, that's what you get to have. You have lowly realities. Okay, so one understands that that's what the Mikdash is. The Mikdash is a makam of hisbaininus without maisim. Then, because we live in this world, we take that hisbaininus and we connect it to maisim, which is the Mizbeach. So what exactly is the Mikdash? Primarily, first of all, the Aron, which makes it a bias LaHashem. Just like a base of the bias Hashem is the fact there's the or in there. Now there's an or in there. Judaism demands take these ideas and translate it into the day-to-day life of what you need, which for you is karbanis. So speaking in this world, you need some kind of physical reality which will express this connection. And God deemed the physical reality being the karbanis. So what you've done is you translated your value system into maisim. Okay, that's the avodas karbanis. Not only is it maisim of you, your prati, but we need a national reality as such. We need a nation to experience that translation from meditation and values into maisim. So thrice yearly, the whole freaking nation comes to do the korban oilus chagiga, the shalmei chagiga. They all have to do that. It's not enough to have it a private reality. Thrice yearly, the whole nation shows up. As I've said before, you want to make a killing, buy real estate in Yerushalayim and invest in livestock. Two things you have to do. I told you that already before. Remember that. You want to invest in livestock because everyone's going to be chayv a lot of korban chatas and oshim tolus and oshim. Don't worry about it. You'll make a killing if you corner the livestock market. If you own the Chicago stock market yards, you'll do well. Add real estate in Jerusalem because everybody's going to come for Aliyah L'Regel. And we have memoirs of Roman soldiers during Bayis Sheni that described how the whole Nachal Kidron was white with tents. You had millions of people there, so it was white with tents. He actually describes Erev Pesach. Very interesting. This does exist, okay? So I can admit today, I know the modern Jew does not live in tents. He needs running water. He needs real estate. I'm telling you right now, make a killing, buy real estate in Jerusalem. That's what's going to be happening. This is the Beis Hamikdash. So in other words, according to the Beis Hamikdash, it is the Mizbeach. But it's not the way the machlekes, is it the Oren or the Mizbeach? The machlekes is it the Oren for Nevuah, or is the Oren for his bindness, which is translated into the Mizbeach. But to say that the Iker is the Mizbeach versus the Oren, that's simply not read well. I say it again, it's very important because you'll end up hearing it somewhere. So I'm already telling you, lo nachon. Okay, now the Rambam describes when he calls Migdash, he calls it Mizbeach. Why? Because as I said before, it is true that the focus is the Oran for Bayis Hashem, but Migdash demands translation of meditation into practical reality. So now read a Rambam. Source down. HaMizbeach Mekomo Mechuvan Biyoter. The Mizbeach's place is very accurate. The place is never changed. It is there forever. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ze Mizbeach LaOila. This is the Mizbeach for the Oila LiYisrael. This is it. Nowhere else. This is where it's made. Uba Migdash. Obviously, talking about Migdash. We're talking about Mizbeach. Why is it right? Uba Migdash Ne'ekad YItzchak Avinu. We're talking about the Mizbeach. And the answer is because he's using the word Migdash of saying the place of the Mizbeach, and you'll see in a minute, because the next halacha says that Mizbeach is the place that was the Akeidat. But here he now calls it Migdash. Point in instant usage of words. He should have said Uvu b'makoma Mizbeach hazeh ne'ekad YItzchak. He doesn't say that. He writes Uba Migdash, pointing out, as I said, which is true, that the Mizbeach itself is a focal point in the Migdash. And I grant that to be true. I just added it's number 2. It's an expression of a number 1. But at the end of the day, the Ramban does not even mention the Mizbeach at all. He says, that's one of the things you do a lot of things. What's the Agdora of the Migdash? Nevuah. That's what he believes in. According to Rambam, the Agdora of the Migdash is Hisbainus be Babris and B'Tirgumai in its translation in Korbanos. That's the difference between them, okay? One is basically man to God talking to man. That's the Ramban. God in search of man. These are different books, etc., by profound authors. One is God in search of man. And the other, which is according to Rambam, it is man in search of God. You meditate on him, you translate your feelings or your emotions through your kabbanis. One is God coming down to you, the other was you rising towards him. That is the real machlekes of Ramban and Rambam. In case you just want to clarify that. But here he calls it Migdash, because yes, that is the idea of the Migdash. Take your thinking and translate it into into a mizbech. That's what the mikdash is. So that's why he changes the verb into the noun rather and calls it mikdash. Ne'ekad YItzchak. Now, what are the words? YItzchak was bound. Are we talking about a situation? Or are we talking about an action? The verb is not akad Avraham, but ne'ekad YItzchak. There's importance, not that Avraham did anything, but there was such a reality. Look at it, which is quite not what you're used to always. Let's see the next slide. Shene'emar lech l'chol eretz Samaria, v'ne'emar b'divrei hayamim, vayichal Shlomo livnot et Beit Hashem b'Yerushalayim b'Har HaMoriah. Asher nireh leDavid avihu, asher hichin makom David b'Goren Arnon HaYevusi. So we know one thing, that the Mikdash on Har HaMoriah, YItzchak was ne'ekad. But look at the next line. The next halacha, the Rambam says, u'mesaris b'yad hakol, which is an interesting way of calling a medrash of Pirkei Rabbi Elazar. In other words, Pirkei Rabbi Elazar, so if you would say just the word midrash, midrash for Rambam does not have to mean historical fact. There are quite a few Rambams where he questions whether a certain medrash is historical fact or not. Normally, Maral constantly sees midrashim as not as historical fact. For example, give you small examples. The Medrash says, and I saw this unbelievable Haggadah of Pesach by Barry Chait, where he takes all these midrashim and makes these gory pictures and says, this is what happened. That's what you tell your children. For example, he said that the children in Egypt, they were like sunflower flowers. They basically at night, they were afraid the Egyptians would get them. So they were born in the field, so they would like go underground, and then in the morning they would sprout out like a sunflower flower, and they would come out again. And there's a picture of them like that. And then I open up a Maral, because I used to read that. I did study that at one time. And Maral says, if you think this happened, you're a fool. Imam was right. Come on, please. Okay? It means to say, and he goes into a whole allegorical interpretation, which is just... I'll give you another example. My raw yam, that the yam it's coming up, that it's split. It saw the Oren of Yosef. Guys, the Yam Suf doesn't have eyes, and believe me, it doesn't see Oren of Yosef. So first of all, he starts saying it means A, and it beats C, and it means D. He says, you really want to think that actually that's when it happened? I don't mind if you say that too. But that's like option number 4. I don't know, you know how to read Agodas Chazal. It's very complex. For information on this to be very specific, you have to read Reb Shmuel HaNagid's Mavoila Talmud. In the beginning of Mesechtas Brachas, Reb Shmuel HaNagid, which was Kadmoine HaRishonim, way early. I mean, really early, right after the Kufas HaGoyim. So he has a thing there on Agodas. I suggest you read it. I mean, that would be your primary source of how we deal with Aggadas. You read Reb Shmuel HaNagid, he has, well, I'm not going to teach that here today. It's a topic which has to be seen from primary sources and well-researched. And you read Reb Shmuel HaNagid, what he has to write there. There's also there's a mimer of the Ramchal on the Aggadas. If you have an Ein Yaakov, you know what that is. It's a collection of all the Aggadas of Shas. So the Hagdama and the Ein Yaakov, there's a Hagdama, which is a big mimer of the Ramchal, Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, famous ethicist, Kabbalist, poet, playwright. I own like 4 books of his plays, okay? Unbelievable play. Young guys, yeah, very unbelievably gifted person. Philosopher, logics. He's got a lot of books of different types. He's like one of the most multi-disciplined scholars around, except for Rambam, of course, okay? But he's like unbelievable. He's really cool. So was clean shaven for quite a while, only growing a beard later in life. That's why they didn't think he was holy, because he didn't have a beard. Modern Orthodox, I'm telling you. I'm telling you the way it was, okay? Okay, so that's what people ask me, what Sefer Musa should you learn? Mesilas Yesharim, okay? Because he's a tremendous person. He's unbelievable. Okay. So anyway, so we have, he has a tremendous mimer on Agodas. You should see it. The one who took Agodas, unbelievably interesting. The morale sometimes takes to task people which don't, he himself is quite flexible with Agodas. Yet, there's a certain famous book called Mori Nine by Emmanuel DeRusi, which forget, I'm not going to teach you history at the moment, but he wrote a whole book against them to show how there's logic in the Agodas called Ber HaGoyla. Ber HaGoyla is a book of defense of Agadot, showing that there's logic behind it. It's just not wild, crazy stories like these are Blachman stories or something like that. No, there is enormous logic behind them. But there'll be allegorical logic. It does not, if it can be factual, it'll be factual. It doesn't have to be. For example, when the pasuk says "Vatishlachet amata" by this bas paroi, what's the pshuta shel mikra? Come on, she sent her maidservant. Okay, what does Rashi teach us? No, you went to kindergarten. She stuck her hand out, and when it went out for another 10 yards, right? Okay, no, okay, come on, do me a favor. Could be. I'm not saying it can't be, but why would God do that? Does God just make miracles because he wants to, oh, look what I can do. Whee! You know, come on. And the weirdest thing is, I want to tell you something. I remember I got very angry once. Reb Chaim Shulevitz said, if it's such a ness, why isn't it written as a ness? She says, it's not a ness. If really you want your hand to go, it will go. I tried it. It didn't work. But this is Reb Chaim, remember, said this. Oh, come on, Rabbi, like relax on me. I just want, you have to be a little critical, right? You can't just accept everything. You have to want me real. Okay. Okay, but what can I do? I'm a bit cynical. Okay, but this is a reality. So when we look at our goddess, we have to understand how to take it. One of the biggest fallacies in this generation, I see these history books by a guy called Rottenberg, Am Olam, four, Olam Bayis Sheni. It's all based on the Agonis and Gittin. Now, who can take that as history? What? That in Tur Malka, there were 16 million people? You know how big it is? I've been there. There's no room for that amount of people. Hello, wake up. Okay, you have to understand that these are allegories and Chazal. There's nothing there but there's nothing. Chazal, there's nothing bigger and wiser than Chazal. They spoke, as the Rambam writes before in a few places, they didn't want every idiot to understand. Because we don't say things of profundity before the man is a major, major scholar. And therefore, they wrote it in a way that only those who are totally encultured in the discipline will have an iota of understanding what they meant. When you look at a Goddess Chazal, you take them and say, okay, there's something enormous here, but obviously I'm an idiot, so why even go near it? That's how you have to look at these things, okay? Because you're talking about a Baib, Ravina, Ravashi, Robert Chana, I don't know what, Abishol. You're talking about the greatest of the greatest, the deepest of the deepest, They didn't have acid trips, okay? They weren't tripping over shrooms. We're talking about big people, okay? And these people wrote profoundest ideas in whatever way they wrote it. But you can't, or you don't have to take it as history. It's not a pasuk. You have to understand that. That's another pasuk. Going back to here, so that's why the Rambam does not say every medrash is history. But he says when he takes a certain Pirkei or a Belazar, he decides that it is history. U'misayris biyad hakol means it is tradition of hands of everybody. This is what happened. Rambam has a way. Won't you say ev amru b'medrash? Actually, many times I said before, he's dubious. He questions midrashim. Is this really history, or is this some kind of a, whatever it be? Okay. So here he writes the lashon misayris biyad hakol. This is tradition, hands of everybody. So he doesn't say it's a medrash. No, that won't do for him. Means his ongoing tradition equals we accept it as what is historical evidence. If you have a non-challenged chain of information, of credible bearers of information that you really respect, going all the way until the proximity of the occurrences, right? That's what you're talking. That's called history. Okay. Misaris biyad hakol means the call people that good old Maimonides respects. A lot of nice people there. There's a chain leading there. That's what he's saying. That's a nice way of saying this is a historical, as far as I'm concerned, this is a historical fact. Look, when you learn a Rambam, you have to know how he talks and what he's thinking. So in those words, Meseres B'Yadakol, all I just said lies in those two words. Okay, Meseres B'Yadakol, Sha'amakim Shebana By David Shlomo HaMizbeach B'Gerin HaRavna, Hu HaMakim Shebana By Avram HaMizbeach V'Akod Alav YItzchak. V'hu HaMakom Shebana Bo Noach K'Shiyatza Min HaTeva, V'hu HaMizbeach She'ikrivu Alav Kain V'Hevel. And we pointed out, this is very interesting. I remember pointed out the geography, like, hello, people went back and forth here. Many things we spoke about already. One thing I didn't speak about, and this one I'm about tonight. In the first halacha, we see Akeidat YItzchak as a passive situation. And in the second halacha, when we talk about Mizbeach as the overall mikdash, the overall place, we describe Akeidat YItzchak as a passive situation. Ne'ekad Yitzchak. When we talk specifically about the Mizbeach, there we use the verb. We don't say Ne'ekad Yitzchak. We say Okad Bano Avram Mizbeach Okad Alav Et Yitzchak. Here we have an action specifically of Abraham, not a passive situation. Now, why would the Rambam change his language? Yeah, well, once again, if you're used to reading him, you read he doesn't play games with you. His Hebrew is unbelievable. The man is very accurate. He's not an American which doesn't know Hebrew. Okay, and he's meduyak. And look at the link. It's beautiful. Bamikdash, key word, equals the total edifice. Okay, which is expressed with the Mizbeach, but we're looking now at the total edifice. Whatever's in the Mikdash. Okay, Ne'ekad Yitzchak. There was a situation that YItzchak was tied together, literally hand and feet. That's what it means, right? Nekad, hand and feet tied together. He was immobilized, shall we say? He was immobilized. And then we have in the second halacha, when we talk specifically about the place of the altar, not in the broad sense of the altar, in the sense of the whole edifice of the Mikdash, in the altar, for specifically, there's another aspect of the Akeidat, which is Abraham bound or immobilized his son on the altar because he was going to do what he did. Okay. Well, he didn't slaughter him, so he couldn't exactly say that. So all he did was Halel Oila, Okad Olav on the altar, right? It says Yitzchak, go on the altar. Okay, now that he's on the altar, Dad, what do I do next? Just stay there and shut up and give me your hands and feet. And he tied him up like before you brand an animal. That's what he did. Okay, Okad, he tied together his hands and his feet. You ever try it? Take someone, tie together hands and the feet. That was the Akeidat. Okay, then feel what Yitzchak says, Dad, my back hurts. Or something like that. It's interesting what he felt at that time. But that's what he did. Took your hands and feet and he tied them up. That's what he did on top of an altar. Then he took a knife. But that was the story. Why is that? There's obviously two aspects of the Akeidat. One is attributed to the broad spatial area. One is specifically deals with the Mizbeach per se. That's clear when you read Rambam. And he believes there are two aspects in the Akeidat. One is the situation, or one could say that which allowed the situation. There was a certain situation which is like unbelievable. That happened in the Mikdash. There was a certain action which was unbelievable, and that happened on the Mizbeach. So one has to understand what is the situation that he's talking about, and what is the action that he's talking about. Well, one reads more in Nevuchim. One realizes the Rambam himself, it's one author. And okay. So you don't start saying shtiklach Torah from who knows where. You go to him. That's a klal, okay? If you want to understand Pshat in the Rambam, where do you go? First of all, you go to his writings, to his shuvas. You go to his Ber Nevuchim. You go to his Akdamas. Then obviously you go to all the sugis, all the riffs, and all the ribigashes. And then you go to Rabbi Chananel. And then you go to the Aruch, because the Aruch is full of Mishnah Sagainim, which is basically where the Ribigash God is shut them from. And if you don't have that, you go to Tshuva Sagainim, to Oitza Sagainim, whatever it is. There you'll end with all that. That's the places where you should be looking, of how these people do the sugyas, because that's the be'er, that's the well for which the Rambam drank his chokhmah. But you don't look shot in the Rambam according to some Garnat, which made a diuk in some Reb Kiveger, which made a diuk in some, I don't know, Tosfos read. None of them thought the way he did, okay? You have to figure out where he came from, okay? You have to understand where how he read the sugya. Okay, you want to know first you look at Rabbeinu Hananel. First, there's a letter of the Rambam to his son that says you should learn the Piyush of Rabbeinu Hananel. Why? Because his Messiah is the Messiah of the Goyim. There's a letter of the Rambam to his son. He also tells him not to learn the French, the French people. He said they eat too much meat and the fumes hit their brain. Okay, here she writes this. Okay, so they're clouded in their thinking. He was an aristocrat, you know what I mean? Like when Mr. Slobodka. So you understand. So he says, you should read Rabbeinu Hananel, Kabbalah Goyim. So you look in Mishnat Gonim. I said the shir just today on Chuppas Nida. There's so many different Achronisha tests. Listen, I'm not going to waste your time. Hey, I took out 3 Chuvas Goyim and showed them where the Shat and Rambam was where it came from. But Rabbi, what about all that? All that should never have been printed. That's all. It's very simple, but people don't own the right library. You weren't taught to research in the right library, so you wouldn't know. Anyway, where did I say the shir? In Reshit. Okay, I say Gemara shir there too, and they're learning Ksubis. I teach Ksubis, would you believe it? Ksubis, Tanya, and Chumash. We're doing Shar Yichud ve'Emunah. That's the other part of Tanya. Very interesting. That's a Shar Yichud ve'Emunah, and I do whatever I did. Okay, my gig. The third one is my gig, whatever I have a bellyache I talk about. Okay, so anyway, go back here. So you're all invited to Rashis, Wednesdays, 3:30 to 6:30. Okay, nonstop. Okay, weiter. They have better mattresses there. I think the food's better here, but the mattresses are good there. Also, they pipe in music to wake you up. Nice, let's face it. Anyway, yeah, not for you. Okay. Okay, so here's the question. What is it? What are the 2 aspects of the Akeidat that the Rambam is referring to in this Perik Beis Hilchos Beis Abchira? That's the question. And the answer is, let's go into this source Hey. But I'm going to go immediately to the second side. The right column, last paragraph. Source Hey, which is the Mari Nevuchim. Give it to me and I'll show it to you. No, now you can take this and give me that. I bigger letters, I can read it. And also, it's a better translation. So we're not going to have exactly the same words, but this is the accurate one. You'll be able to follow me. Right, you turn the page around. It's Source Hey, the second side, the right column, last paragraph. Okay, Inyan Avram Avinu, right? That's what it says over there. You see it. Now let me find it here. Yeah, good. So he says as follows. Oh no, I'm actually missing some pieces here. Give me for a minute. Sorry, 1 minute. Omnam Inyan Avram Avinu. I thought I had. Why is it not here? It should be. No, interesting. Why not? I don't know. Okay, we'll look together with him. Inyan Avram Avinu Alav Hashem Ba'Akeidah Kolel Shnei Yanim Gdolim. The idea of the Akeidah and the Akeidah includes 2 major ideas. Hey, Mipinot HaTorah, they're actually found cornerstones of your faith. Hayan Echad Lo Idia Otanu, to teach us. Gvul Avat Hashem v'Yirato, what are the limits that a human being can attain in both love of God and awe of God? How far can you go? What is the human potential? It's engaging where you can go. Now that means to say, wow, people can actually stretch themselves. Well, here's the limit. Ad heichan hi magat. To what extent can one stretch themselves in this? And God commanded, which is not accurate, as I pointed out Friday night, not exactly a commandment, but he uses the language commandment in a populistic way. This is not really a commandment, as we pointed out. V'tziva b'zeh inyan asher lo yidme lo netinat mamon v'lidot nefesh. God asked from Abraham to do something which is so horrendous and so beyond the scope of normalcy, much worse than much harder than telling a person, get yourself killed. Believe me, he's right. There's a mitzvah, get yourself killed. I go, they put a plate on top of my head and put me on the building if I get myself killed. You're a kodesh, whatever it is, right? You become they make a nice yiskif for you. Up in heaven, they dance with you. People who die, Malchus, no one can go in their mechitzas. They state in the Gemara. It's a cherry pie in heaven, right? So, okay, that's the mitzvah. But no, we got to actually do something which is more than getting yourself killed and more than giving away all the money in your life. Why? It is beyond more than anything that God can demand from man. Anything possible. It is something that there is no way that normal nature of people could even get close to this. This is the total opposite of anything normal. There's an old man and he's barren. He's 100 years old. He has no children, okay? No children that will follow his legacy. I'm going to add that if you don't mind, okay? But he's a kar b'tachlit, hakosef livlad, and he's dying for a kid. Ubal osher gadol, and he's a very rich man. V'ish nichbad, he's honorable. Ubocher sheyeh mizaro uma. And he really wants a child in order to perpetuate a nation, as we discussed on Friday night. I need to continue this revolution. I need a nation to come out of this. If it'll just be a few guys, raising a flag and screaming, that doesn't do anything. I need to change the world. I need a nation that will live, as the Ramban elaborates in Parshas Azinu, that God keeps us going because he needs a nation which will live the story of Sinai. If not, it'll fall into mythology and people will put it together with Odin and Thor and Zeus and Minerva and Jupiter. And it will not have an effect on humanity. The effect on humanity is there because there's a nation living, breathing, suffering, and being happy with the story of Sinai and the covenant. Ramban writes this in Parshas Azinu. That is why God forgives us, although he really would like to get rid of us. He'd really like to get rid of us because we're really bad. But he needs us because he needs us to facilitate his agenda of creation, that the world should recognize monotheism, and that can only exist if there's a nation walking, talking, breathing the story. He writes this before Ramban, the beginning of Azinu. So this, Avraham Avinu understood that he needs a child, he needs a nation to further this whole agenda. But Nolado ben Achrayu, she finally had a child after he had given up, right? He, at the end of the day, had himself his Ummah over there and Yishmo, but that was not going to be his nation. That was not going to be the continuance. He realized the game's over. Now you can take it. Now I have my translation. How much would he love this kid and couldn't live without him? You can imagine. He finally has this child, which is the continuance of his total legacy. It's beyond how much he cares about this child. But because of his love for God and his mitzvos, he would begin to let go of all those emotions. And he threw away everything that he hoped for in this child. What did he hope for? The continuance of the monotheistic revolution and the consolidation of it. He was going to throw away kol mashikivabo, all his hopes that he had hoped that would happen to the child, everything. He's willing to give away everything, okay? Umiher, and he immediately went without procrastination, the shachto, to slaughter him. It doesn't say that he kvetched. By the Mila, he kvetched. He went to ask Mamre, should I do it? Should I not do it? Okay, here, he didn't kvetch, no questions asked. Okay. They once asked the The sat Meruv, he davened late. They asked him, Rebbe, it says Vayashkem Avram Babayka, you learned Pesachim, right? Daftalit. So he says, you're right, but it doesn't say how long it took for Yachvish's Chamorai. You have to go to the mikveh, you have to do this. This takes hours. So to make a chana, to take your chamor, and to make something you can go further with Maria, takes time. So he davens at 10 o'clock. He's up at 5, but it takes him 5 hours to prepare for davening. It's a big yesod. Vayachvish's Chamorai can take time. Hello? That means rolling out of your bed into whatever clothes you're wearing, and sometimes you fall asleep with your clothes, into shul, put on your tefillin, and snore during V'urachu. So the Rebbe said, no, you need Vayachvish's Chamorai too. Maimra Amuzga, important to remember. So it's weiter. So what did he do? He went immediately, La'achar Kamayamim. He went 3 days, but he was going. He didn't procrastinate. He was willing, because God said so, to drop every agenda that he had and every normal emotion that he had. Okay? Why did God tell him to wait 3 days? Because if he would have done it immediately, when God commanded, he would have done it out of some kind of, okay, I don't want to think about it. God says, do it. I want you to think about it. I want you to let it roll like a good whiskey in your tongue. I want you to taste this when you're about to give up. He actually went through 3 days of hell. Okay? He went through 3 days of hell and he let it all go because the most important thing is my relationship with the Kadosh Baruch Hu. It's what we discussed on Friday night. All that he did. Below Yeshuv Dat Medukdak. I need you to know what you're doing. I am giving up. But if you did it after a few days, wait from when God had told to do this. It's after contemplation, after serious thought. And ascertaining, okay, why am I doing this? This is God's will. And I love him and I'm on him, and that's why I'm going to do this. In other words, identifying why he's doing it. Rambam points out it's not enough to do. You have to say, what made you do it? Everything what I discussed Friday night is all, if you medagdik Lashon Rambam, it's all lies in this Mer Nevuchim. It's not enough to do. Why are you doing it? I want you to identify with your Ava, that because of your Ava, you have no agendas. Because of your year, you're so much in awe that nothing is more important than. You have to be able to think and live that experience and then do the Allah. Cutting the throat is not the story, it's the why. It's what it represents that I need you to dig in deeply and understand. So he says, once his love and his awe is as such, no other things should be important to you. And not to prefer any other emotional reaction. No emotions, no ideals, nothing should stand in front of the fact that this is God's will, and since you love him, you follow God's will. He didn't go to kill, to slaughter the kid. Yeah, because if I don't listen to God, he will kill me or he will impoverish me. He did it because God told him to do it. Simply because it's mutal of the adam. It's my response. He's the melech. He writes, it's what man has to do. Man is obliged to what? Because you love God. Because he loves the celestial one. V'yiratoni is in awe. And that's why he did it. The Lashon of the Rambam in the Yad is Oiseh ha'emet mipnei shehu ha'emet. You do the truth because it's the truth, not because it gives you meaning, purpose, and direction, not that it serves you in any way possible. Because if you thought of any way possible would serve you, he would possibly, if that's the case, I shouldn't be slaughtering him. Nothing. Rambam says, ולא לתקוות שכר ולא ליראת העונש, כמו שביארנו במקומות מספר. לפיכך אמר לו המלאך, כי עתה ידעתי כי יראה אלוקים אתה. כלומר, שבמעשה זה, אשר בו יאמר עליך בהחלט יראה אלוקים. ידעו כל בני האדם, Vul Yirat Hashem Mahi. From Avraham, we learn to what extent can man totally melt down in front of God. Let go of any sense of self or any considerations. His whole life he was willing to drop as if nothing happened, because that's what God wants. That's enormous bittul, enormous yira. That is the gvul that no one, it is not a normal thing. It's impossible. To demand this for anybody else is almost impossible to think about. Yes, but the Medrash says God demands this from people that he knows that will do it because he wants to show the world how far we can go. That's number one. Now look at it carefully. He's talking about the action of Abraham. The action was so profound, okay, to show what can motivate him. So in the two verbs we find in the Rambam, Okad bana Avraham is hamizbeach, ve'okad alav YItzchak and halacha beis would be this, the action of Avraham. But he did something unbelievable. Now we have to look for the second part of the Akeidat, which would justify the language in halacha aleph of there was a situation. In other words, what allowed that to happen? What generated that situation? So that's found in the next in the Rambam. So the Rambam Vayena Sheni, what is the other aspect of the Akeidat? Leidi'enu, to let us know at kama amiti etzanvim, how true and verified is it by prophets? Mashabalahem me'et Hashem b'chazon. That's what we see in a vision, as we described. We discussed this on Friday night. It's really a vision and an image. And I want you to see that right now. So right now you can go to flip. You have there a Hilchos Yesodei HaTorah. You have it. And you can go there to, let me find it, 1 minute. Oh, this is not it. Whoever did this, oh, here it is. You say that to Perek Zion, and we will go to Halacha Gimel. Do you see it? Rama writes, Hadvarim Amodiim LaNavi, the things which are the Navi is motivated about, B'mareh Nevuah, through the visions of prophecy, Derech Mashal Modiim Loi. We do it through allegory, through a mashal. Umiyadi chakek belibo pitaron hamashal, and then in his subconsciousness, in his heart, which equals somewhere deep inscribed in his psyche, lies the true interpretation of this. Now he must look within himself to find it. What is that, and how does he do it? Now, obviously, you need I was never experienced prophecy. The prophet has certain prophetic way of thinking. With the prophecy is not just to get the nevuah, but through the prophetic experience, you also have the tools of being intellectually honest and finding in your subconsciousness the interpretation of that vision. So you need the nevuah to get the vision. You need the nevuah to interpret the vision. That is what a navi is. Kimo, example, Asulam Shirah Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu saw a ladder, if you remember, Umalachim Olim V'Yordim Bo. But what is that? That was the mashal that he saw. How did Yaakov Avinu interpret it? So he says, Moshal L'Malchiot V'Shibudam. It's a mashal for Jewish history of people, of Malach, of the different kingdoms, which would put us into exile. Or Kemo Chayot Shirah Yecheskel. Yecheskel saw a bunch of wild animals, Mayor, in the throne room of God. You don't really think the guy has a lion, an eagle, and a cow in his throne room. Believe me, there ain't too many kings I know that have a barn in their throne room. So you don't really think that's what it means. There's no cows living up in heaven, okay? There's no lions or eagles. It's a metaphor. Now understand what the metaphor is. Well, that's what Yecheskel had to know. Yeah, he saw a stick which had almond fruit coming out of it, and he saw this blown up pot with its facing north, okay? Or Hamigila Shirah Yecheskel, he saw a burning scroll, Yecheskel, a certain measurement of food, Shirah Zcharia, these are all Mishalim. V'chein Shar Nevi'im, all other prophets are the same thing. Yesh, Shem, Omrim, Mashal, Pitrono, Kmo Elu. There are places where the pasuk describes the mashal and also says what the pitara, what the solution of the mashal was, which the Navi says, Kaya Amar Hashem. Sir Nefuach Mitzafon Tipatach Hara. Makel Sheked Ani Shoked to be Machriv Yerushalayim. These are the Navi that says X. It tells you what it is and tells you what it means. So you have the mashal and you have the pitaron. V'yeshem omrim ha-pitaron bilvad. Yeah. They just say, V'ar'em asel, Koy amar Hashem, Zachalti lach avos k'lusayich, lech techachem b'midbar, be'ez le'zruah. That's not the words of God. That is the Pisroi Nachokok Beliba Shel Navi, which he uncovers through Nevuah to the vision that he saw. The language is the language of the Navi. His language interprets the vision. It's not the word of God, it's the word of the Navi. I want it to be very clear. Koy Amar Hashem, Zachalti lach avos Aben Yakeli Ephraim, Im Yeled Shashurim, etc. Those were not words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Those are the pisrain, the solution of Yirmiyahu to that mashal. But we doesn't tell us the mashal; it only tells us the pisrain. Okay. Upamim omrim mashal bilvad, beloy pisaron. Yeah, there's plenty of that in Navi where we see the mashal and we don't see it doesn't tell us what the pisaron was. Kemitzati v'yicheskel. V'kulam, but all of them, b'mashal v'der chidai misnabim. All the prophecies are always either with a riddle or some kind of an allegory, a mashal. There's no direct words of to God. This one has to understand. That's as clear as day. Now, the obvious question is, that means the human beings, this man, which is really a professional, God does not talk to people who can't understand his language. But at the end of the day, he's a human being, and human beings are not infallible. Does he think that he's doing the right thing? Or does he also have doubt? Is there any iota of doubt? That's the question on the table. The Torah tells us, trust the interpretation of a Navi, right? That's what you have to do. Elif Tishmi, you have to trust the Navi. Is a Navi, when I say God says, God spoke to the Navi, why do we call it spoke? A clear, direct communication, which he's capable of interpreting. When I talk to you, I'm talking English, but you have to translate it through your cultural baggage, whatever it is. You have to figure out, well, the more you know me, the more you hear me, you can understand where I'm coming from and understand what I really mean. I taught you on Friday night. You want to know Rashba? Learn Rashba. You want to know the Rambam? Roll through all the Chuvas of Rambam. Go through it. It's very simple. It's not a hard thing to do. It's like a finite material. Rashba is a bit rough because there's like thousands of Chuvas of Rashba. It's really thousands of Chuvas, so it's easier to learn an Igros Moshe than Rashba. It's much smaller amount of Chuvas. But this is and easier to read. But the Navi understands. But you're interpreting. Any interpretation by definition is subjective. Like when you people read an English translation of something, you're missing the boat. You don't have the nuance of language. You don't see the multicolors of the language. You don't see the multiple possibilities of interpretation. You're doing actually reading an interpretation by somebody. That's what translations are. You've closed the gate, your openness to the primary source, which allows a whole plethora of ideas. And no, you're focused on one thing. Why? Because he said so. Some beard, which for what's his name, for Nodowitz, decided that's the pshat in this Gemara, and you're stuck with it, you poor child, because you want to make it see him. Okay, it's like, it's Rachmanis to even do that. It's Pashta Rachmanis. It's anti-scholarship. I really think that people should, I think it's a busha for people to need this. If you're Ben Torah, if anything, during your age, your years, maybe when you haven't mastered the material and you're working very hard and you want to do a fast daf yomi, and you have no time, what can I do? Take the art scroll. Now, muktzimach mismius. You're supposed to master the language, the context, the culture, understand the meanings of what Abaroim say, what Tanaim say, and the Rishonim say. That's what you do now. You're not going to work. That's what you're supposed to be doing. And now, until you finally become then maybe you don't have time. But if you do it well now, you won't need an art scroll. If you see anybody using the article later, because they didn't do well, they wasted, they didn't develop the real skills of reading intelligently. They were using, they were learning Gernat, Gabus, Gabet, they were learning more Rashi Taisus. Do you guys finish every Taisus on the Amid and know it? Or do you skip according to the lecture, which is said? Well, let me tell you, if you don't learn every freaking Rashi and Taisus on the Amid, it's criminal. I didn't say read, I said learn. Okay? It's simply criminal. That's what I have to say. You're undermining your futures. I'm telling to you right now, don't undermine your future. You have it. Don't splurge it. Use it wisely. I have to crusade here because sometimes I feel like I'm Don Quixote fighting windmills. But if no one's going to say it to you, I will. Don't waste your future. You don't live forever. You have finite time, and you are expected to minimum. You should know clearly. You're going to be a corporate lawyer, but you're going to be in a yeshiva discipline for X amount of. A minimum demanded for a person is to know Nashim and Nezikin. Not that much. Okay, minimum Nashim and Nezikin. That's really not that much. Okay, not telling you Kachim, Tyrus, Zroim, forget it. Beyond Nashim Nezikin. I'm a Vata and Arachaim because you probably read the great book on Hilchot Shabbos, 3 volumes in English. You'll be from with that too. But Nashim and Nezikim, you're not going to read any great books. And they don't have, thank God, great books on that. Even the Mishnah Berurah spared us and didn't write the Mishnah Berurah and Ibn Ezra. But if he would have, Jews would be more honest. They may be less frum, but they would have been more honest. I guess he thought frumkeit is more important than honesty, so he did on Arachaim. But at the end of the day, minimum Nashim and Nezikim. Minimum. Every Jew can, and don't tell me you didn't have time. It's simply not true. It's simply not true. I'm saying it clear. This is shtus. It's not true. And I expect you to become great corporate lawyers or professors of philosophy and know what to make a PhD and who knows what other few are. You can do the best and the finest, but there's no reason you shouldn't have mastered Nashim and Nezikim. There's no teretz for it. I can tell you right now. I have students which are doctors, lawyers, that mamish know it. They're good. Yeah, I have one in England that I don't want to talk about at the moment. The guy, every morning he's up learning Gemara B'iyun from 5 until 7. He has a chavrusa again after a whole day of work from 9 until 11. And he makes Baruch Hashem enough money. On Tuesdays he doesn't work, he learns all Tuesdays. And on Sunday, because half of the day you have to be with the children, Sunday, but 6-7 hours minimum every Sunday, he's piling away from 5 in the morning. At the end of the day, he puts in so many hours of learning, more than a lot of Kolo people. And he's making a very good living. So people start telling me, I have to make a living. I know you have to make a living. But the day starts at 5, in case you don't know. Okay, and speak, and it ends whenever, but physically when it can end. And Sunday is a yom maximum chetzi l'Hashem v'chetzi l'mishpacha. So that it depends how many hours you sleep, but there's a good 6 hours minimum. You don't have to watch the football game. Okay, you can probably stick it in with the mishpacha. You get your wife into football, then you can do it on family time. Okay, that's what you have to do. Okay. Etc. And I'm telling you, and I'm sure if some people make enough money, they can take days off. And I don't want to talk about 2 months in the summer, which you won't go fishing in Montana, the world won't die. Okay? Instead of that, finish Saita, Nidorim, Nazir. With greatest respect, you need, go to the Kruger for 3 days to clean your head, but don't have to sit there for 3 weeks. Okay? Pillsbury will do. It's a Kruger for the poor. Okay, what can I tell you? You have to understand, that's what the reality is. So this is a Navi. So the Navi basically is supposed to have intelligence to be, if you remember to describe what a Navi is, you don't understand the personality of the Navi. He's like beyond normal. Raman describes, just to show you in 1 minute. I'll just quote it. He looks at everything through the total mass of God's wisdom. In everything he sees, science, math, metaphysics, the works. He looks at this, he sees it's chemistry, it's physics, it's history, it's metaphysics. Literally, he writes, Mitzur Rishayna, that means from the primary first surah of creation, ad Tabor Oretz. It's a nice way of saying to the lowest level of the ocean. He sees that, he sees everything, the total massive information and everything. That's a hyper intellectual. He's an Athenian scholar. He doesn't just learn a little Rajba. You understand? As that Alice, that is a Navi. You know why there's no Nevuah now? There ain't no candidates for this. You read what Rambam says, it's frightening what he has to know. If he's not capable of seeing Mitzura, Rishon, Nevad, Tabor, Oretz, blah, okay, he's not a candidate. So next time you think of him, you'll think, wow, the guy had 7 doctorates. That's heavy. I'm not talking about that. That's bis bekutcha. Well, there were no achronim around, so it was less Torah to learn. You know what I mean? You didn't have to figure out Rav Kiveger. There was no Rav Kiveger, Machai. You know what I mean? But at the end of the day, I'm serious about this. That's God demands all that. Did you ever think of that? You're going to go back to university or to college. Take it as part of your broadening experience, which will make you a person, which is the tzur name of a person. Think of Rambam, think of Ramchal, think of the Nevi'im. Yes, you're supposed to master the whole picture to see Chachmas HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the whole thing. That's what this is all about. This is frightening to understand this. Okay? But that's a Navi. That's the person who's capable of translating. But he's a translator. Is he sure about this? Isn't there a place for some cynic to say, come on, you know, he made a little mistake every so often. Infallibility is only the Pope on the throne when he has the fisherman's ring. You know what I mean? As soon as he takes the ring off, he's like one of these, what was this family of terrible popes? He's a Borgia. Yeah, they were like the Rishoyim Gemurim, right? When he had the finger on, he was a Kodesh Kedoshim, whatever he knocked on, whatever he did. But as soon as he took the finger off, he's like George Washington, slept here, slept there, slept everywhere in New Jersey. So this guy also is all over the place. You understand? You know what I mean? Infallibility is a Christian doctrine. Our prophets make mistakes, don't they? Moshe Rabbeinu bolachal kas, bolachal tos. But in Nevuah, they don't make a mistake. Now, why would you think that's true? He's capable of making a mistake. He's capable of sinning. David Shlomo Melech was a Navi. He sinned. I don't know if you know the Gemaras. Okay? Yeah, bad news. Okay? So how come he's a Navi? And the Chiddush is that by a Navi, this is the Hashgacha Yoina, in his Nevuah, he doesn't make a mistake. How do we know it? From the Akeidat. So the Rambam writes here in the Moreh Nevuchim, just read that carefully. To teach us how true is it by the prophets? It's clear in day that they know how to translate this. That man should not think. It does come in a vision, as we said, an allegory, a rhyme, and a riddle. The tool used to God to transfer information to man is through the world of imagination. Rhymes and riddles, visions are functions of your imagination. You have a dream, right? A vision. So it's not like he sees 20/20 vision. He lives with the world of imagination. That's what it is. He's got a trip. Okay? Well then, אפשר שלא היה מה ששמעו או מה שנמשל להם אמת, maybe there's a stickler guesswork there. It is possible. You're asking him to interpret, and at the end of the day, he's not exactly in total facilities because he's imagining, he's dreaming. Maybe he's not accurate in his interpretation. And this undermines all of God's dialogue with man. You understand that? You take away this from Nevuah, you've taken away man's capability of trusting dialogue with God. Lefikach, therefore, Ratzah Lashmi'enu, God wanted us to understand, Shekol Mashiach Navi b'mar'eh nevuah emet v'nachon etzel Navi. It's as if he heard words. It's clear as day to him. He has no iota of doubt. En lo safek b'shum davar mimenu klal. V'dino etzlo k'din kol advarim hamitzutiyim hamusagim b'chushim o b'sechel. Anything you experience through your five senses, through your logic, is clear to you. For the Navi, through Nevuah, when he experiences Nevuah, it is clear as day. There's no place for a mistake in the interpretation of Nevuah. How do we prove it? Well, just look at Avraham Avinu. He ran immediately to slaughter his only son, which he loved immensely, and he had all the reasons to translate that differently, didn't he? It wasn't explicit words, it was in vision. If there was any iota of doubt, a 1%er, a 0.00001%er. There's no way he would run to do something which is not normal or natural. To do something beastly and horrendous, he would have sat down and thought about it and didn't say that. That means God told me I'm doing it. But he didn't tell you words. Yeah, but that for me is words. The two facilities, Nevuah, for the Navi are as much as you experience through your eyes and your ears and your senses. This is the second part of the Akeidat, to teach us what allowed this to happen, the clarity of understanding God's will. That's the Nekad YItzchak. There is a place of transcendency where man can meet God, as we pointed out. Yes, God meets man and man meets God in the Mikdash, vis-a-vis the Aron. We will couple here both the Ramban's Nevuah and the Rambam meditation in God. The dialectic relationship between God and man, which according to Ramban is man meeting God, talking to man through prophecy, and according to Rambam, it is man encountering God through your meditation. That dialectic relationship is the Mikdash. Remember, that created a scenario which YItzchak will be put on an altar. You need to first to know that that's the will of God for that to happen. So there's two aspects of the Akeidah. There's the broad Mikdash, which is actually focusing on the Aron. But in that place, in the Har Maria, where it is the Aron, that can happen. Because there is a dialogue between God and man. Where did it happen? On that Mizbeach. What happened on that Mizbeach? Someone actually went and did it. So there's the background which allowed the situation. Bamigdash Nekad YItzchak, and then there's Al HaMizbeach, Akad, Alav, Avram, et Yitzchak. There you have the two Pshat and Rambam. It's very clear. I mean, when anyone that knows how to touch a Rambam, these two aspects of Mer Nevuchim are clearly the two aspects found there. So I think that can just show you, the Maisa, you have a Mea Shiloach. I think at the end, you have a Mea Shiloach, which is the first Ishbitzer Rebbe, Talmud of Rav Simcha Bunim of Peshischa, the Chavrusa of Rav Mendel of Kotsk, which afterwards walked away from him and opened his own Chassidus, because Rav Mendel went into seclusion for 16 years, and the Avreichim needed someone to be Madrichim, so he opened up his own Beis Medrash. And he writes as follows: the book is called Mea Shiloach. So maybe one day I'll teach you something about. In Yan Yisrael Shel Akeidat Haya Gadol HaEmunah She'el Avram Avinu B'Shem Yitbarach. Now he's going to describe what are the reasons why he'd really have to believe in God in a way which is beyond logical. Ki av shama lo kol yezeracha. He promised him that your seed will be, like the stars in the earth, sand, right? And he says, my covenant with you, I will continue with Yitzchak. He said that there. Does it mean God retracted? That can't be. Can't be. Logically, it can't be. You can't kill a person, he's going to be your continuity. He didn't ask questions. You know, both things had to happen. How is it possible? Logically impossible. So what? He believed in God. Not that he said, well, God changed his mind. This will happen, and this will happen. I will slaughter him, and this will happen. How? Impossible. Right, the impossible will happen. I trust God in an illogical way. I don't cut him down and paste him to my logical self. I'm willing to accept the impossible, for he is beyond logic, who created logic. He's not defined by logic, and he's not governed by logic. So illogical phenomena will happen. That type of faith doesn't reside in logic. You believe something which is impossible. No, he didn't have a clear statement, slaughter your child. As we mentioned a few minutes ago, we quoted the Rambam. What is it, Yud Kevavke Nisa? Yud Kevavke is God in essence, clarity. Elokim means Hester, Teva. It means there's a restriction, a tzimtzum. It's not clear. There's something, it's filtered through something. What's it filtered through? Chalaim, Chida, Umashol. That's a medrash also found in Zohar, that all the prophets of Moshe Rabbeinu saw through a non-clear glass. Which means to say, they had to interpret. They saw reflection. They didn't see, God didn't talk to them directly through a clear mirror, hey, hello. No, there was a reflection. There's a machitza between God and between you. And you have to figure out what he wants. That's why no one said that the Akeidat in Nisayon is YItzchak. Why? He's a from a guy. He believes that that this is the will of God. You're the prophet. I trust you. Many people die because God wants to. We do a lot of things God wants to. What was his test? He didn't have an exact statement. He had to translate it, right? Would he have had any sense of subjectivity? He had any sense, okay, I have to figure this out, this has to make sense, etc. And he would naturally, this doesn't make sense. I love my son. How could this possibly be? We have agendas in life. That would have coerced him psychologically to have compassion for his child. And then what would have happened? He would have translated it differently. He would have translated like it says at the end. It didn't mean to slaughter. I meant to say put him on the altar, but not slaughter. But if he would have translated that earlier that way, he would be a failure. Because he would not have released himself from all agendas. The true interpretation when you release yourself from all agendas is slaughter him. At the end of the day, God didn't want him to slaughter him. But he wanted to interpret it as mean slaughter. After you interpreted it correctly, now I will reinterpret my words to say it means just to put him on the altar, not else. It was in the eyes of Avram. How do I interpret the will of God? That should be more than enough. This sums up everything we learned. I mean, the Ram, in my eyes, is much clearer, but this is another angle there. This is basically the Nisaya. So there are two aspects. Is man capable of letting away all agendas, being totally intellectually honest against every iota of logic and emotion, because that's what the text says. I read the text, I saw the vision, this is what it means. It can't be, it's illogical what you're saying. Did you ever hear that before? Or it's horrendous to say the guy, no, I'm sorry, that's what he said. The Mussar here's what I told you on Friday night. You learn the Blat Gemara, you learn the Rajra, what does he say? but that's not a nice svara. It's a spelabatish. Doesn't matter. What does he say? Okay, everything has to fit with the words. And if he says X, he doesn't mean Y. Okay, like someone who told me over a certain shot in a certain round, I'm not going into it. And he says it means like this. It means that as far as din X, she's married. As far as din Y, she's not married. I says, I know Rambam enough to know that he doesn't play games with me. If you want to say it, he would explicitly say she's married for X and not for Y. All the Rambam says, she's like an Arusa. So you understand she's like an Arusa for A and not like an Arusa for B. Why wouldn't he write that? I know him. He doesn't play games with people. He would write it. And there's no source for that. He would write Yeroyali Leimar. He doesn't do that. You guys are crazy. So that's why I erased whatever be. Okay? What does this, but this is beautiful if you accept this. So I think that a million can be beautiful and it can be ugly, but it's not the question. Who cares if it's beautiful? Is it accurate? Beauty is a subjective judgment. When you say, oh, the world is round, that's very nice. That's the most idiotic reaction I've heard from it. You'd say true or false. To say, this is wood. Oh, how nice. What are you, hello? I mean, it's irrelevant. It's totally irrelevant. Someone told me, so it says, subjective beauty has nothing to do with truth. Do you ever say a million is 2 million? Oh, that's beautiful. You need your brains checked. You're an idiot. When you tell me the shear was nice, means say it's not accurate. It was probably off the charts, but it definitely had aesthetic value. I find that demeaning when people tell me that. It's like the English, they say, it was brilliant, which means to say mediocre. Okay? Okay, I mean, the Englishman tells you it was a brilliant shear, means mediocre. Okay? Okay. Oh, was very nice, Rabbi, which means was beyond low par. Okay, if you know the English, that's A means this. Whatever it means, you go down 3 dargahs. Okay, that's the so it's the same thing. It was a beautiful shear, which means say they're shtiyot, but it was nice, but it was very poetic. I enjoyed the poetry. Okay, very nice. It was a poetry reading. You don't make bichsatay on poetry. The Akeidat is the capability of walking away from all agendas and looking at what does God want here. That's what this that's nekad of YItzchak. The pshat is it's capable of seeing things the way they are. Very important nakuda. It was super important nakuda. I can't think more important in learning than this, and that's the yesod of the Akeidat. Those are the 2 aspects in Rambam, and I say a good night to all of you. All right, how do I close this thing? Stop recording. Stop recording.